In the heart of Europe, more than 2,000 years ago, there existed a civilization that would forever change the world. It wasn't the largest empire in history, nor the most ancient, but it was the one that reshaped the very foundations of civilization itself. Its people built roads that connected continents, structures that stood the test of time, and a culture that would echo through the ages. This civilization, Rome, was not just a city. It was a force that redefined the boundaries of power, knowledge, and human ambition. The Roman Empire wasn't just an empire. It was a vision of unity and control, of civilization bound together by law and order, by iron and steel. A vision that turned a small city on the banks of the Tiber River into a sprawling empire that ruled over 1/5 of the known world. But what was it that made Rome different from the countless empires that came before or after? What fueled its rise from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of human achievement? Rome's rise was not inevitable. It was the product of ambition, bloodshed, and a relentless drive for power. From the legendary founding by the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, to the ruthless conquests that stretched across 3 continents, the Roman Empire was built on more than just military strength. It was shaped by the minds of visionaries and the courage of countless men and women who believed in a world order unlike anything before it. But greatness, as history has taught us, comes at a cost. For every triumph, there was a sacrifice. For every conquest, a challenge to face. From the grandeur of the emperor's palaces to the gritty lives of the common people, Rome was a civilization that knew both glory and suffering. So, what does the Roman Empire mean to us today? We see their influence in our language, our laws, our art, and even our cities. The very roads we travel and the concepts of democracy and citizenship that guide us were first carved out by these ancient Romans. Their legacy is not just in what they built, but in what they believed. Their vision of law, order, and governance shaped the world that would rise after their fall. But empires, even the mightiest, do not last forever. Rome, like all things in history, eventually succumbed to the weight of its own ambitions. The fall of the Roman Empire was not a sudden catastrophe. It was the slow erosion of power, the breakdown of institutions, and the collapse of an ancient vision. Yet, even in its demise, the legacy of Rome lives on. Its influence still pulses through the veins of the modern world, inspiring us, shaping our lives, and reminding us of the timeless pursuit of greatness. This is not just the story of an ancient empire. This is the story of an idea, a dream of unity, a dream of power, a dream of legacy. And though the Roman Empire may have fallen, its story is far from over. At its peak, the Roman Empire covered an astonishing 5 million square kilometers, an empire whose reach was so vast, it connected 3 continents. Over 70 million people lived under Roman rule, each of them bound by a common idea, a vision of greatness. But how did this empire, one that would leave an indelible mark on the world, rise from the ashes of a small city-state to dominate nearly the entire known world? The story begins, not in the grand city of Rome that we know today, but in the humble beginnings of a small settlement. Rome was once nothing more than a cluster of villages, a far cry from the sprawling metropolis it would eventually become. It was a city founded on myths, on the tale of Romulus and Remus, twin brothers abandoned and left to die, only to rise from obscurity to lay the foundations of one of the greatest empires the world would ever see. Rome's early years were defined by survival. As a city-state, it had to fight to secure its place among the surrounding tribes and kingdoms. Roman soldiers, disciplined and unyielding, would fight to expand their territory, taking land, forging alliances, and crushing any who dared to challenge their growing power. The Romans understood something that few others did. To control an empire, you must first build an army like no other. And so, the Roman legions were born, tough, relentless, and unstoppable. But Rome's rise wasn't just built on the blood of its soldiers. It was built on something even more powerful: strategy. The Romans were masters of warfare, yes, but they were also brilliant tacticians. Unlike other empires that relied solely on sheer strength, the Romans understood that to rule the world, They had to integrate the conquered, bring them into the fold, and offer them something far greater than mere domination: citizenship, stability, and a place within the Roman system. As the empire expanded, so too did its innovations. The Romans were not just conquerors, they were builders. Roads, aqueducts, bridges, each piece of Roman infrastructure was a testament to their understanding of what it took to unite such a vast empire. Through these innovations, they created the backbone of a world that would remain connected for centuries. A world where travel, communication, and trade became as seamless as the Roman roads themselves. But there was another secret to Rome's rise: their ability to govern. Rome didn't simply conquer and rule. They created systems, laws, and institutions that brought order to the chaos of their empire. The Senate, the courts, the legal system, these were the pillars on which Roman society stood. Rome's gift to the world wasn't just in their military might, but in their ability to create a society built on the rule of law and civic duty. It was this foundation that allowed the empire to thrive, long after the battles had ended. But nothing lasts forever. Even as Rome expanded, its foundations began to crack. The Republic, which had been so carefully constructed, began to fray. Ambition, greed, and power struggles threatened to tear the empire apart from within. It was a man like no other, Julius Caesar, who would ultimately tip the scales. Caesar's boldness, his insatiable ambition, and his genius on the battlefield would propel Rome into a new era. But with greatness came sacrifice, and the question remained: would Rome's thirst for power be its undoing? In 49 BC, Julius Caesar made a fateful decision. He crossed the Rubicon, defying the Senate and setting Rome on the path to revolution. The Republic would never be the same again. This was not just the end of a republic, it was the beginning of an empire. With the rise of Augustus, Caesar's adopted heir, Rome would be reborn as the Roman Empire, and its power would reach heights never before seen in history. From the ashes of civil war would rise the greatest empire the world had ever known. This is the story of the Roman Empire, a story of ambition, conquest, and unimaginable greatness. A story that begins in the dust of ancient Rome, but stretches across the globe, leaving a legacy that still shapes our world today. Before we dive deeper, let me know where you're watching from, and suggest the next story you'd love to watch. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. The story of Rome begins, not with an empire or an army, but with a myth, an ancient tale that has been passed down through the centuries. The story of two twins, born under extraordinary circumstances, who would change the course of history forever. According to legend, in 753 BC, Rome was born not from the hands of kings or warriors, but from the will of the gods. The twins Romulus and Remus, sons of the god Mars and the Vestal virgin Rhea Silvia, were destined for greatness. Abandoned at birth by their jealous uncle, they were left to die on the banks of the Tiber River. But fate had a different plan. Saved by a she-wolf, the brothers were raised in the wilderness, nurtured by the very animal that symbolized Roman strength and resilience. This moment, drenched in myth, would lay the first stone in the foundation of what would eventually become the greatest empire the world would ever know. As they grew older, Romulus and Remus returned to the city of their birth, where Romulus, the bolder of the two, would become the first king of Rome. According to the legend, he killed his brother Remus in a violent dispute over the city's founding, making Rome's birth not just a tale of gods and wolves, but one of bloodshed, ambition, and the ruthless determination that would come to define the Roman spirit. But in those early years, Rome was nothing like the grand empire it would become. It was a modest settlement, surrounded by rival tribes, struggling to secure its place in a world of constant conflict. Rome was born of 1,000 struggles, small wars, alliances, betrayals, and a constantly shifting balance of power. Rome was, in those early years, little more than a collection of tribes, a loose network of people bound together by the shared goal of survival. But from these beginnings, a vision began to take shape. Rome would grow, not just through military conquest, but through shrewd diplomacy and a ruthless will to endure. Through centuries of warfare and alliances, Rome steadily expanded its influence. By 509 BC, a defining moment came, a moment that would mark the birth of something revolutionary. The Romans, tired of the corruption of their monarchy, overthrew their king, Tarquin the Proud, and established a republic. No longer would Rome be ruled by a king, but by elected officials and a senate that would represent the will of the people. The Roman Republic was a revolutionary political system, unlike anything that had existed before it. Gone were the days of absolute monarchs. Rome now had elected officials, magistrates, and a senate. This system, still in its infancy, was a delicate balance of power, designed to ensure that no one man could dominate the Republic. In the early years of the Republic, Rome expanded its influence across Italy, often through a combination of military conquest and political alliances. The Romans understood that to survive, they had to adapt, bringing conquered cities into the fold with promises of citizenship, protection, and prosperity. This clever tactic helped to solidify Roman power, and by the end of the 4th century BC, Rome had control over nearly all of Italy. But expansion came at a cost. As Rome grew, so did its internal tensions. The struggle between the patricians, Rome's wealthy and aristocratic class, and the plebeians, its common citizens, began to tear at the fabric of Roman society. The plebeians, tired of being excluded from power, fought for rights and representation, leading to a series of political reforms that gradually brought greater equality to Roman life. At the heart of the Roman Republic was its intricate system of checks and balances. Power was divided between two consuls, elected annually, who held executive authority and commanded the army. The Senate, made up of patricians and former magistrates, held the power to advise, legislate, and manage foreign policy. In times of crisis, a dictator could be appointed for 6 months, given absolute power to save the Republic. Rome's military was central to its success. The Roman legions, known for their discipline and organization, were an unstoppable force. But Rome's greatness wasn't just forged on the battlefield. It was built through the alliances it made, the cities it incorporated, and the loyalty it inspired. For over 400 years, Rome expanded its borders through both conquest and diplomacy. It conquered the Italian peninsula, then turned its gaze outward, first to the Mediterranean world, and eventually, beyond. From the Punic Wars with Carthage, to conflicts in the East, Rome's army became a symbol of invincibility, and its republic, though fragile at times, held strong. With each victory, Rome cemented its place as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Its political system, its military strength, and its ability to assimilate new peoples into Roman life allowed it to continue expanding at an unprecedented rate. And yet, despite all its achievements, the Republic faced internal strife that would eventually lead to its downfall. By the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was beginning to show signs of weakness. Power struggles between military generals, like Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, threatened to tear the Republic apart. But it was Caesar who would change everything. His defiance of the Senate, his crossing of the Rubicon, and his march on Rome would mark the end of the Republic and the birth of a new era, the rise of the Roman Empire. At the height of its power, the Roman Republic seemed invincible, a shining example of democracy, law, and military might. The Senate, composed of Rome's elite, was the heart of governance, where decisions were made that affected the lives of millions across the empire. But even in the Republic's golden age, the foundations of Rome began to crack. Beneath the surface of Roman society, tensions were rising. Military commanders, once loyal to the Republic, began to grow in power. Generals like Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar were not only celebrated for their victories on the battlefield, but were also gaining immense personal influence. With each conquest, each victory, the loyalty of their legions grew, and with it, their control over the people of Rome. Julius Caesar was perhaps the most ambitious of them all. A brilliant strategist and an astute politician, Caesar had a vision of Rome's future, and it did not align with the traditional power structure of the Senate. His conquests in Gaul, his rapid rise to prominence, and his ability to connect with the Roman people made him both a hero and a threat. Caesar's campaigns in Gaul were legendary. For nearly a decade, he led his legions to victory after victory, expanding Rome's territory far beyond its borders. His name became synonymous with military brilliance, and the loyalty of his soldiers was unwavering. But his growing popularity and power did not sit well with the Senate. To them, Caesar was no longer a faithful servant of Rome. He was a dangerous rival, a man who might one day seek to make himself king. The Senate, controlled by Rome's aristocracy, was founded on the idea that no single individual could dominate the Republic. The system of checks and balances was meant to ensure that power remained divided among the Senate, consuls, and elected officials. But as Caesar's power grew, so did the fear of his ambitions. Initially, Caesar had formed a powerful political alliance with Pompey and Crassus, known as the First Triumvirate. Together, they ruled Rome's political landscape. But as time passed, their alliance began to fracture. Crassus died in battle in 53 BC, and Pompey, once Caesar's ally, grew increasingly distrustful of his former friend. Fearing Caesar's growing power, Pompey sided with the Senate, demanding that Caesar disband his legions and return to Rome as a private citizen. But Caesar would not bow to their demands. The Senate's demand was clear. Caesar was to disband his army and return to Rome. But Caesar knew that doing so would leave him vulnerable. Without his legions, he was just another senator, powerless and exposed. To him, the Senate's command was not just a political maneuver, it was a threat to his life's work, his legacy, and his vision for Rome. Caesar was faced with a decision that would change the course of Roman history. In 49 BC, Julius Caesar made a decision that would forever alter the fate of the Roman Republic. Standing at the banks of the Rubicon River, the point where Rome's territory ended and the rest of Italy began, Caesar faced a choice. To cross the Rubicon meant defying the Senate and declaring war on Rome itself. "The die is cast," Caesar is said to have declared. These words marked the beginning of a new chapter in Rome's history. With that single act, crossing the Rubicon, Caesar defied the authority of the Senate and signaled the start of a civil war that would engulf the Republic. It was an irreversible move, and there would be no turning back. The Roman legions, loyal to their general, crossed the Rubicon with Caesar at their helm. As the legions advanced, the fate of the Republic hung in the balance. Caesar's move was not just a military maneuver, it was a declaration of power, an assertion that he was the true ruler of Rome. And so began the most significant civil war Rome had ever seen. The war was brutal, and it swept across Italy. Caesar, with his superior tactics and the unwavering loyalty of his soldiers, quickly gained the upper hand. Pompey, initially confident in his Senate-backed forces, was eventually defeated in a series of key battles. Caesar's genius as a military leader became undeniable. He had not just challenged the Senate, he had won. Pompey, the once mighty general and former ally of Caesar, fled to Egypt, hoping to regroup. But there, in a tragic twist of fate, he was betrayed and assassinated, leaving Caesar as the undisputed ruler of Rome. With Pompey's death, the Republic was all but finished. Caesar had defeated his rival, eliminated the Senate's opposition, and taken control of Rome. But his victory came at a price. Rome, once a bastion of the Republic, was now on the verge of becoming an empire. Caesar's victory marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of an entirely new era. Caesar's eventual appointment as dictator for life in 44 BC sealed the fate of the Republic. Though he introduced numerous reforms aimed at strengthening Rome, the very system that had once been a shining beacon of freedom and governance now lay in ruins. The Senate was powerless to stop him, and Rome had forever crossed a threshold from a republic to a single ruler, a path that would eventually lead to the rise of the Roman Empire. The Republic, as it had existed for over 4 centuries, was gone. Julius Caesar's defiance and victory had marked the end of an era and the dawn of a new age, one in which the power of the Senate would be no more. The age of emperors was about to begin. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, in the heart of Rome, Julius Caesar, the conqueror of Gaul and the most powerful man in the Republic, walked into the Senate, unaware that his fate had already been sealed. 4 months, Whispers had echoed through the Senate, whispers of a plot to restore the Republic, to bring an end to Caesar's reign as dictator for life. To many senators, Caesar's growing power was a threat to the very fabric of Roman liberty. In their eyes, Caesar was no longer a hero. He had become a tyrant. For centuries, Rome had prided itself on being a republic, a government where power was held in the hands of elected officials. But Caesar's assumption of ultimate power and his declaration of himself as dictator for life had shattered that ideal. In the minds of his enemies, his assassination was the only way to restore the Republic. Caesar fell to the knives of his closest allies, men he had once trusted, men who believed that by ending his life, they could save Rome from the path to monarchy. But the death of Caesar did not bring the Republic back to life. Instead, it ignited a new wave of chaos that would change the course of Roman history forever. With Caesar's death, the power vacuum left behind was immediate. The Senate had hoped to restore the Republic, but instead, Rome was plunged into a struggle for control. The conspirators, thinking they had saved Rome, soon found themselves powerless in the face of those who had the support of the Roman people. A new figure would rise from the ashes of Caesar's assassination, a figure who would not only claim Caesar's legacy but would build upon it to create something far greater. Octavian, the 18-year-old grandnephew and adopted heir of Julius Caesar, was little known to the people of Rome at the time of Caesar's assassination. But in that moment of crisis, Octavian saw an opportunity to seize his destiny. His calm, calculated nature was a stark contrast to the political chaos that engulfed Rome. Although Octavian was young, he proved to be a shrewd and ambitious leader. He quickly aligned himself with Caesar's loyalists, including the famed general Mark Antony, and together they began to consolidate power. But Octavian's rise was not without challenges. He faced numerous rivals, not least of whom was Antony himself. For a time, Octavian and Mark Antony formed a political alliance, known as the Second Triumvirate, along with Caesar's loyal supporter Lepidus. But even with their combined power, the Republic's old structures remained fragile. The rivalry between Octavian and Antony grew as both men sought to position themselves as Rome's true leader. Antony, with his military experience and strong base of support in the East, appeared to be a formidable opponent. But Octavian was patient, calculating, and had the loyalty of the Senate and the Roman people. The first decisive victory for Octavian came at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, where he and Antony defeated the forces of Brutus and Cassius, the leading conspirators in Caesar's assassination. With the death of Brutus and Cassius, the path to power seemed clear for Octavian. However, the final showdown between him and Antony would come much later. The final confrontation between Octavian and Antony came in 31 BC, at the Battle of Actium. Antony, allied with the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, had already begun to carve out his own power base in the East, but his alliance with Cleopatra would prove to be his downfall. Octavian, with his superior naval strategy and loyal legions, decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces, forcing them to retreat to Egypt. With Antony's defeat and the subsequent suicide of both him and Cleopatra, Octavian became the undisputed ruler of Rome. The Republic, though it had endured for centuries, was now gone. The transition from Republic to Empire had been completed. In 27 BC, Octavian was granted the title of Augustus by the Senate, marking the birth of the Roman Empire. With this title, Augustus became the first emperor of Rome, not through force or rebellion, but by skillfully navigating the intricate political web of Rome's Senate, army, and people. Augustus would go on to reign for over 4 decades, from 27 BC to AD 14, ushering in an era that would forever change the course of history. With Augustus came the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a period of unprecedented stability, prosperity, and cultural flourishing that would last for over 2 centuries. Under Augustus, Rome expanded its borders, established a more centralized government, and enjoyed remarkable economic growth. The arts and literature flourished, with poets like Virgil and Horace capturing the spirit of the age. For the first time in centuries, Rome could finally breathe easy. The Roman peace meant that the empire, though vast, was united under a single, stable rule. The legions were strong, the economy thrived, and the citizens of Rome felt secure. Augustus had brought stability to a world that had known nothing but turmoil for decades. Augustus not only transformed Rome into an empire, but he also set the foundations for the empire's enduring greatness. He reformed the military, the tax system, and even the Roman calendar. His reign marked the dawn of an empire that would last for over 1,500 years, shaping the course of Western civilization. The transition from republic to empire had been a tumultuous one, marked by civil war, betrayal, and ambition. But under Augustus, Rome found peace. The republic was gone, and in its place stood an empire that would, for centuries, dominate the known world. And though Augustus passed from the world in AD 14, his legacy would echo throughout the empire for generations to come. At its height, the Roman Empire was a marvel of engineering and governance, a civilization that revolutionized the way people lived, traveled, and built. The Romans were not just conquerors, they were creators. They did not merely dominate, they transformed. And at the heart of this transformation was their unmatched ability to build. The Romans built roads that stretched across their vast empire, roads that connected cities and cultures, from the farthest reaches of Britain to the sands of North Africa, from the Iberian Peninsula to the shores of Asia Minor. These roads were the arteries of Rome, enabling the swift movement of legions, merchants, and ideas. The phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," was not just a metaphor, it was a literal truth. The Romans constructed over 400,000 kilometers of roads, creating an unparalleled network that united the empire and laid the foundation for the modern road systems we rely on today. Roman roads were built to last. Layer upon layer of sand, gravel, stone, and large paving slabs created roads that were durable enough to withstand centuries of use. But it wasn't just the materials, they were designed with purpose. They had drainage systems to prevent flooding, they were crowned so rainwater could flow off, and they were perfectly aligned to ensure the most direct route to their destinations. These roads were the backbone of the empire, allowing for the swift movement of Roman armies, which helped maintain control over distant provinces and the free flow of trade and communication. Another extraordinary feat of Roman engineering was their aqueducts, massive structures that carried fresh water to cities and towns across the empire. These were not just channels of stone and concrete. They were the lifeblood of Roman civilization, bringing water to fountains, baths, public toilets, and homes. At their peak, the Romans had built over 11 aqueducts in Rome alone, supplying the city with over 300 million gallons of water a day. Constructed with precision, Roman aqueducts used gravity to transport water across long distances, even through challenging terrain. Some aqueducts stretched for more than 50 miles, passing over valleys, hills, and ravines, all the while maintaining a gentle gradient to ensure a continuous flow. The aqueducts not only supplied Rome with fresh drinking water, but also fed the public baths that were central to Roman social life, as well as irrigation for fields, supporting agriculture and feeding the empire's growing population. These aqueducts made possible the construction of bathhouses like the Baths of Caracalla and the Baths of Diocletian, gigantic complexes that were more than just places to bathe. They were centers of social life, where citizens from all walks of life gathered to relax, socialize, and conduct business. The Romans believed in the power of water, both for its practical uses and its symbolic importance in uniting the empire. But the Roman Empire's greatness was not just in its roads and aqueducts. Its cities were true marvels of urban planning, architectural grandeur, and cultural sophistication. Cities such as Rome, Alexandria, and Carthage were centers of power, trade, and culture. They were symbols of Rome's vision, cities that were built not just to function, but to inspire. The Colosseum in Rome, one of the most iconic structures in history, was not just a theater for blood sport. It was a symbol of Rome's dominance and its culture of spectacle. Capable of holding up to 50,000 spectators, it was a place where the people of Rome could witness gladiatorial combat, animal hunts, and mock naval battles. But more than that, it was a reminder of the empire's control over life and death, and its ability to bring together people from all classes and regions in one unified space. Then there is the Pantheon, a temple to all the gods, whose dome, with its perfect symmetry and oculus at the center, remains an engineering marvel even today. Built under Emperor Hadrian, it stands as a testament to Roman ingenuity, combining architectural beauty with structural innovation. Its massive concrete dome, once the largest of its kind, has influenced architecture for millennia, inspiring countless buildings across the world. And then there's the Roman Forum, the heart of political life in Rome. This was the place where Rome's most important decisions were made, where the Senate met, where triumphal processions were held, and where the fate of the empire was decided. Surrounded by magnificent temples and basilicas, the Forum was a place of both political power and cultural significance, reflecting the glory and influence of Rome. Rome's cities were also centers of culture, where art, philosophy, and literature thrived. The Romans were great patrons of the arts, commissioning sculptures, frescoes, and mosaics that depicted their gods, their triumphs, and their daily lives. In cities like Rome, Alexandria, and Carthage, libraries, theaters, and schools were bustling with intellectual activity. It was in these cities that much of Roman culture was cultivated, preserving the knowledge of ancient civilizations and contributing to the cultural richness of the empire. The city of Alexandria, with its great library, was a beacon of knowledge and learning. It was here that scholars from across the empire gathered to study philosophy, mathematics, and the sciences. Alexandria was the intellectual center of the empire, where the knowledge of the Greeks, Egyptians, and Romans converged. In the grand design of the Roman Empire, cities were more than just functional, they were a statement. They were the physical embodiment of Rome's vision for the world, a vision that sought not just to conquer, but to unify, to build, and to endure. Through their engineering marvels, their architecture, and their cities, the Romans created a lasting legacy, a legacy that continues to inspire and shape the world today. Roman society was a complex tapestry, woven with the lives of individuals from many different walks of life. It was a society marked by clear divisions of class, where one's birth often determined their place in the world. At the top of this social hierarchy stood the patricians, the elite class of wealthy landowners, politicians, and military leaders. Below them were the plebeians, the common people who made up the bulk of Rome's population, from farmers to merchants to soldiers. The patricians lived in grandeur, with large homes adorned with exquisite art and the finest furnishings. They held immense political power, with the Senate, once a body of elite patricians, serving as the heart of Roman governance. Their lives were characterized by wealth, influence, and control, both in Rome and throughout the empire. It was they who crafted the laws, shaped the policies, and commanded the armies that expanded Rome's borders. In stark contrast, the plebeians lived a much harder life. While they were citizens of Rome, they had limited political power and were often dependent on the patronage of the patricians. Plebeians made up the working backbone of Roman society: farmers, laborers, artisans, and soldiers. Their contributions were vital to Rome's prosperity, but they had little say in how the empire was governed. Despite their lack of power, the plebeians were not passive. Over time, they fought for their rights, leading to the creation of the office of the tribune, elected officials who represented their interests. The plebeians demanded and gradually earned political equality, securing laws that protected them from the arbitrary rule of the patricians. Yet, the class divide remained deep, with the elite enjoying privileges that were far beyond the reach of the common people. And then there were the slaves, millions of men, women, and children who had no rights or freedom. Slavery was an integral part of Roman society, and slaves were used for everything from household service to working the land to fighting in the gladiatorial arena. Slaves were seen as property, bought and sold without regard for their personal lives. While some slaves could earn their freedom, most lived in servitude, their lives marked by constant labor and subjugation. Despite the rigid class divisions, certain core values permeated Roman society. Romans valued citizenship above all. To be a Roman citizen was a privilege, one that granted legal rights, protection, and the ability to participate in the political life of the empire. Citizenship was highly coveted, and even those who were conquered by Rome were offered it as a means of integration and loyalty. The Romans were also deeply committed to the rule of law. Roman law was one of the empire's most lasting legacies. It influenced legal systems in Europe and beyond for centuries. Laws were designed to ensure justice and order, and the idea of innocent until proven guilty became a cornerstone of Roman legal practice. For the citizens of Rome, the law provided both protection and accountability. The Romans also placed great importance on family. The father, or pater familias, held ultimate authority over the household. He was responsible for making decisions for his wife, children, and slaves, ensuring the family's welfare and legacy. Roman society was patriarchal, and family loyalty was paramount. The family was the basic unit of Roman society, and its values, duty, respect, and honor, were passed down through the generations. But for all their values and cultural sophistication, the Romans also had a taste for brutal entertainment. The Colosseum, the largest amphitheater in the Roman world, was the center of this spectacle. It was here that Romans gathered to watch gladiators fight to the death, not just for sport, but for a twisted kind of glory. These bloody games were a form of public spectacle, a ritual that reinforced the might of the Roman Empire and distracted the population from its political struggles. Gladiators, often slaves or prisoners of war, were forced to fight in these brutal contests. Some fought for fame, some for survival, but all faced the grim reality of death in the arena. The games were a reminder of Rome's power, not just over its enemies, but over its own people. They were a tool of control, a way to distract the masses from the hardships of daily life and the growing political tensions within the empire. For the Roman people, these games were both an expression of Roman might and a means of civic engagement. In a society where political power was often out of reach for the common person, the Colosseum offered a kind of shared experience, a communal event where status and identity were forged through the spectacle of violence. It was a brutal form of entertainment, but it was deeply ingrained in Roman culture, a reminder of the empire's dominance and a means of securing the loyalty of its citizens. Roman society was both magnificent and harsh, a reflection of the empire's grandeur and its deep contradictions. At its heart was the belief in citizenship, law, and family, values that held Roman society together. But the empire's brilliance was built on the backs of slaves, on the exploitation of the poor, and on the brutality of its spectacles. The Colosseum, with its blood-soaked history, was not just a symbol of Roman power, it was a symbol of the price of that power, a reminder of the empire's capacity for both greatness and cruelty. For all its glory, Rome was a society built on contradictions. It was a world where wealth and poverty existed side by side, where freedom and oppression were intertwined, and where the thirst for power was only matched by the desire for entertainment, however cruel it may be. And yet, it was this very complexity, this fusion of beauty and brutality, that made the Roman Empire one of the most enduring civilizations in history. No empire, no matter how powerful or grand, is invincible. By the 5th century AD, the Roman Empire, once the beacon of civilization, was on the brink of collapse. The glory that had been Rome's hallmark for centuries had begun to fade, replaced by the harsh realities of political instability, economic decline, and mounting pressure from the outside world. The Roman legions, once the most powerful fighting force in the world, were stretched thin. The empire had grown too large, its borders too expansive to defend effectively. For centuries, Rome had been able to conquer and maintain control over its vast territories, but by the 5th century, the empire faced mounting threats from all sides. The once sturdy walls of Roman power were crumbling, battered by forces beyond their control. One of the most significant threats to the empire came from the so-called barbarians, tribes from the distant north and east, who had long been in contact with the Romans but were now becoming a force to be reckoned with. The Huns, the Vandals, the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths all began to push relentlessly into Roman territory, drawn by the weakening of the empire's defenses and the promise of loot and land. In 410 AD, the Visigoths, led by King Alaric, brought Rome to its knees. After years of tension and failed negotiations, Alaric's army stormed the gates of the city. For 3 days, they looted and ravaged the Eternal City. The sacking of Rome was a devastating blow, a symbol of the empire's vulnerability and the fragility of its centuries-old power. For the Romans, it was a shock of unimaginable proportions. Rome had never been conquered in over 800 years. The sacking of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 AD marked a pivotal moment in the empire's decline. While the empire would stagger on for several more decades, this event signaled the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. The once unstoppable Roman military was no longer able to defend the empire's borders, and the once proud capital had fallen. Internally, the Roman Empire was in disarray. Political instability plagued the empire, with a constant turnover of emperors and infighting among rival factions. Corruption, greed, and incompetence took root in the halls of power, as the Senate's authority waned and military generals began to hold more influence than the elected officials. There was no unity, only division and chaos. Economic decline further weakened the empire. Inflation soared, trade routes were disrupted, and the empire's vast territory became increasingly difficult to manage. The Roman currency lost its value, and the once thriving economy crumbled under the weight of continuous warfare, high taxes, and civil unrest. The cities that had once teemed with life began to decay. Agricultural production faltered, and the infrastructure that had supported the empire for centuries fell into disrepair. With each passing year, the empire's grip on its territories grew weaker, and its once loyal subjects began to question the power of Rome. By the mid-5th century, the Western Roman Empire was hanging on by a thread. In 476 AD, the final blow came. The last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain, marking the official end of the Western Roman Empire. The empire, which had ruled for over 1,000 years, was no more. Romulus Augustulus, the last of the Roman emperors in the West, was little more than a puppet figure, controlled by the military and powerless to stop the tide of barbarian invasions. His deposition in 476 AD marked the end of an era. The Western Roman Empire, which had once ruled most of Europe, had fallen. The fall of Rome was not a single event, but the culmination of centuries of decline. From internal corruption and political chaos to external invasions and economic collapse, the Western Roman Empire had succumbed to forces it could no longer control. Rome, the Eternal City, had fallen. But though the Western Roman Empire had fallen, the Eastern Roman Empire, often known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for another 1,000 years. Centered in Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire would preserve Roman law, culture, and tradition long after the fall of Rome. Under emperors like Justinian I, the Byzantine Empire would continue the legacy of Rome, rebuilding its strength, preserving Roman law, and defending its borders against new waves of invaders. The Byzantine Empire would become a cultural and religious center, preserving much of the knowledge and traditions of ancient Rome while influencing the development of Europe and the Middle East. The Byzantine Empire would endure for another 1,000 years, standing as a testament to the resilience of Rome's legacy. While the Western Roman Empire may have fallen, the echoes of its greatness continued to resonate in the Eastern Empire, where the flame of Roman civilization would burn brightly for centuries to come. The fall of the Western Roman Empire marked the end of one of the greatest civilizations in history, but the Roman legacy lived on. The rise of the Byzantine Empire ensured that Roman culture, law, and influence would continue to shape the world, preserving the empire's ideals long after its fall. And though the Western Empire crumbled, the spirit of Rome would never truly fade. Our cities to the legal systems that govern us, Roman ideas continue to shape the modern world. In ways both visible and invisible, the mark of Rome remains with us, echoing through the halls of our courts, the layout of our cities, and the very language we speak. One of the most visible and enduring aspects of Rome's legacy is its alphabet. The Roman alphabet, developed by the Romans, forms the basis of the alphabet used by most languages in the Western world today, including English, Spanish, French, and Italian. The characters we write, the letters that form our words, all trace their origins back to ancient Rome. From the books we read to the signs on the streets, from legal documents to social media posts, we communicate using a system that was perfected by the Romans. Their alphabet, which evolved from earlier scripts, became the foundation for literacy across the Western world and beyond. But it's not just in the realm of language that the Romans left their mark. One of the most enduring contributions of Roman civilization is its system of law. Roman law, founded on the principles of justice, fairness, and equality, served as the blueprint for legal systems across the globe. The concept of written laws, established through the 12 Tables and later refined by Roman jurists, remains the cornerstone of modern legal systems. Roman law introduced foundational concepts that continue to influence us today. The idea that laws should be written and publicly displayed, so all citizens are aware of their rights and responsibilities, became a key pillar of modern governance. The Roman notion of just civil law, provided the basis for the legal codes in countries like France, Germany, and Italy, and it laid the groundwork for international law. One of the most enduring principles we inherit from Roman law is the presumption of innocence. The concept of innocent until proven guilty is embedded in the legal systems of most democracies and is a direct descendant of Roman legal thought. This presumption ensures that justice is not just about punishment, but about fairness, and it protects individuals from unjust persecution. Roman law did not just shape national legal systems. It also laid the foundations for international law. The concept of jus gentium, the law of nations, sought to regulate interactions between different peoples, much like today's international treaties and conventions that govern diplomacy, trade, and human rights. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of Roman legacy is the concept of citizenship. In ancient Rome, citizenship was not just a legal status. It was a powerful symbol of individual rights, duties, and participation in the political process. Rome's idea of citizenship would evolve into the democratic ideals that underpin our modern political systems. Roman citizens had the right to vote, to participate in the assembly, and to hold public office. While not all people in the empire were citizens, the Romans expanded this privilege over time, granting it to conquered peoples, and thus fostering a sense of unity and loyalty within the empire. Today, we inherit this idea of citizenship, the right to vote, to speak, and to shape the government. The Roman model of citizenship is echoed in modern democracies, where the right to participate in government is central. From local elections to the right to run for office, the notion of civitas, the right and responsibility to take part in public life, is fundamental to the functioning of our societies. Just as the Roman Republic valued active participation, so too do modern nations encourage civic engagement as a cornerstone of democracy. The Romans were also masterful architects and urban planners. The layout of their cities, built with a clear purpose and vision, continues to influence modern city planning. The Romans understood the importance of roads, forums, public spaces, and civic buildings. Their cities were designed to facilitate commerce, communication, and governance, principles that are just as relevant today. Roman cities were carefully planned, with a grid layout that facilitated easy movement and trade. Streets like the Cardo, north-south, and Decumanus, east-west, formed the backbone of every city, and this design remains a model for modern cities, where efficient traffic flow and urban connectivity are key to their success. The grand structures the Romans built, temples, basilicas, amphitheaters, were not just for worship and entertainment. They were symbols of Roman power, culture, and unity. Today, we see echoes of Roman architecture in the grand halls of our government buildings, in the arenas where we celebrate sports, and in the monuments we construct to honor our shared history. Beyond law, citizenship, and urban design, the Romans also left a deep imprint on art, literature, and culture. Their appreciation for sculpture, painting, and the written word influenced countless generations of artists, writers, and thinkers. Roman art, with its emphasis on realism and human emotion, set the stage for the Renaissance and continues to inspire contemporary art today. Roman philosophers, influenced by Greek thought, explored questions of ethics, politics, and the nature of existence. Figures like Cicero, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius shaped not just Roman thought, but the course of Western philosophy. Today, the ideas they put forth continue to inspire debates on ethics, governance, and the human condition. The Roman Empire may have fallen over 1,000 years ago, but its legacy is alive in every corner of our world. From the alphabet we use to communicate, to the legal systems that uphold justice, to the cities we live in and the ideals we cherish, Roman ideas continue to shape the very fabric of our modern societies. Rome's greatness was not just in its conquests, but in its ability to create systems, structures, and ideas that have transcended time. Though the empire is long gone, its spirit lives on in us all. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its story is far from over. While its mighty legions no longer march across the plains, and its emperors no longer rule the world from the Palatine Hill, the influence of Rome endures. From the rise of cities to the laws that govern us, from the very language we speak to the democratic ideals that shape our governments, the legacy of the Romans is woven into the fabric of the world we know today. Rome was more than an empire, it was an idea of governance, order, and expansion that forever changed how civilizations would organize themselves. Though the empire itself fell into the hands of barbarians, the systems it introduced continued to flourish long after its collapse. Roman ideas did not vanish with the sacking of Rome. They evolved, adapted, and spread throughout the world. The very concept of law, of justice, was one of Rome's greatest legacies. The Romans codified laws that were not just rules, but principles of fairness and order. Their belief in the equality of citizens under the law laid the groundwork for the legal systems we still use today. The 12 Tables, the foundation of Roman law, and just civil or civil law, are echoed in modern legal frameworks around the globe, from the United States to Europe, and even into the international legal systems that govern the world today. Roman architecture remains an enduring testament to their engineering prowess. The Romans perfected the use of arches, domes, and concrete, allowing them to build monumental structures that still stand today. The Pantheon, the Colosseum, and the aqueducts are just a few examples of how Roman engineering defied the limits of their time and set the stage for modern construction. Today, when we walk through grand public buildings or pass beneath soaring arches, we are walking in the footsteps of the Romans. The principles they developed in architectural design are the backbone of some of the most iconic structures in the world today, and their influence is visible in the design of cities, public spaces, and even homes. The Roman Empire's influence is perhaps most apparent in the languages we speak. The Latin language, though no longer spoken in its classical form, lives on in the Romance languages: Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Even in English, many words, especially in law, science, and academia, trace their roots to Latin. The alphabet we use, the very building blocks of our written language, come from the Roman alphabet. Their language connected the empire's vast territories and is still connecting us today. The Latin language, though no longer spoken as the everyday tongue, still echoes through the corridors of modern culture. When we use legal terms like habeas corpus or ad hoc, when we describe something as status quo or vice versa, we are speaking the language of Rome. Latin remains the foundation of many modern languages and continues to shape how we communicate. The Roman Republic, with its ideas of citizenship and governance, was a model for the democratic systems that followed. Though the empire eventually gave way to imperial rule, the foundational principles of Roman governance, elected officials, checks and balances, and the role of the Senate are reflected in the democratic structures of the modern world. The Romans introduced the idea of civitas, or citizenship, and with it, the right to participate in the governance of the state. This notion of citizenship, granting rights and duties, became central to the rise of modern democracies. The Roman practice of electing officials to represent the people, as well as their concept of a Senate, provided the blueprint for the democratic institutions that now define much of the world's political landscape. The influence of Roman governance extends beyond just laws and institutions. It is deeply embedded in the idea of civic duty. The Romans believed in the active participation of citizens in the political process, and today, That belief is the foundation of democracy, where every citizen has the right and the responsibility to vote and be heard. Roman philosophers, influenced by Greek thought, contributed immensely to Western philosophy. The Stoic teachings of figures like Marcus Aurelius continue to inspire personal reflection and ethical thought. Cicero's ideas on justice, governance, and civic virtue were central to the development of Western political thought, and they still resonate in today's debates on law and morality. The Romans also made significant contributions to literature, with poets such as Virgil and Horace providing the foundation for epic storytelling, while the satirical works of Juvenal and Petronius remain relevant for their keen social critiques. Their literary legacy has shaped the stories we tell, the themes we explore, and the values we uphold in our literature today. Roman art, with its emphasis on realism and its focus on the human form, set a standard for centuries to come. Today, we still look to Roman sculptures, paintings, and buildings as models of excellence in art and architecture. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, and countless other monuments stand not just as ruins, but as eternal symbols of human achievement, inspiring awe and admiration from visitors around the world. The artistic principles established by the Romans, balance, proportion, and symmetry, continue to influence artists, architects, and designers. From the grand statues in public spaces to the detailed frescoes on our walls, the Romans have left an indelible mark on the visual world. This has been the story of the Roman Empire, an empire whose power, culture, and vision continue to shape the world centuries after its fall. From the roads we walk on, to the laws that govern us, to the very ideals of justice, citizenship, and governance that we hold dear, Rome's legacy lives on in every corner of our modern world. Though the empire may have fallen, its story is far from over. If this journey inspired you, show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more powerful stories from history. And in the comments, tell me which era, civilization, or untold story you'd love us to explore next. Together, let's keep the past alive to inspire the future.